All right, we are back, and welcome to the show, Mr. TB. What's up? What's up? How was your podcast, man? Oh. Uh-oh. Can't hear you. Actually, you guys there? Oh, hold on a second. Maybe I screwed something up. Let me see. Oh, it was me. Sorry. Yeah, there you go. Just call me the sound.
Rookie mistake.
Exactly. But how's your podcast, man? Good stuff.
That was fun. Yeah, it was a good
Cool.
show.
Cool. Thanks for joining us.
As good as it gets for that thing.
I know it's overlaps a little bit, so thanks for coming.
Bit of a marathon. That's okay.
But yeah, well, we're talking about Nation Wars, and we talked a little bit about it. Just we were talking more about just how we thought the format was a cool concept, having to represent your country. And Todd talked about some awesome bar crafts that were going on with the casters there, and just how much excitement there was there. But you casted the event, and I was watching you mostly. So how was it for you? How was the whole event?
Definitely very long. Let me put it this way. O Gaming may have slightly underestimated how long it was actually going to take to do. When we got the original agreement, they said, so it's 2 6-hour sessions for Friday and Saturday, and then probably somewhere between 5 and 6 for Sunday. No.
Not even close, man.
No, not even close. It was like 2 10-hour sessions, and then about a 7.5-hour session, maybe 8-ish for the last day. So it was a bit lengthy there. I think, to be fair, I should have really realized, because it was a bit, I would say, ambitious to think that you could fit 4 best of 5s into 6 hours. In fact, it's 5 best of 5s, because it was GSL dual tournament format. There's no way in a million years you fit 5 best of 5s into that many into 6 hours. That's just not going to happen. So it definitely pushed on for a long time, I think, and I can't imagine how it was for the guys in France. And I mean, Todd, you were up super late having to play that as well, weren't you?
Yeah, I was not happy about it.
No, you were not. You might almost say that the conditions were not so ideal for you.
I think it was a really good idea. We just talked a little bit about this, the nation wars and all that, but they should make sure that they can basically play faster, and they should have shorter breaks between games, because sometimes they are very, very long. Do you agree?
Yes, the breaks were absolute overkill. Between each series, there was a mandatory 15-minute break. It was often extended longer than that.
Wow.
On day 3, they decided to limit the amount of time that teams had to confer for vetoes and to pick the next player to 5 minutes to try and pull that down. But apparently Bishu was DDoSed at some point during it, which meant we restarted the map 4 times, had about 3 big delays, and then finally had to give the forfeit to... I think it was given to Downfall, wasn't it? Yeah, it was given to the French team there. So that happened, which is obviously not something you can necessarily avoid, but there were a lot of delays. I think having that mandatory 15-minute downtime doesn't make a lot of sense for an online event. I can understand it for an offline and LAN environment when you got to swap booths and things like that, but for the French it was kind of a hybrid, because they were casting from Meltdown and doing that stuff there, so they were doing live stuff, but the majority of the viewers were on the English stream, and they weren't getting any of that. So that was a little bit weird, and they were doing a lot of interviews as well. It was really cutting into it, so it kind of ballooned out of proportion into this really, really long event, which wasn't necessarily bad for the viewers, but it wasn't like all good content all the time. The games were excellent.
Yeah,
I was really impressed by the caliber of play and the amount of variety that was coming out of these players. It was really cool to cast Europe again, and I'm gonna be honest, doing all the NA casts recently, then watching the Europeans, it's a whole different fucking game watching the Europeans play. I've got to be honest, it was just higher level play in general.
We were just talking about an American team. Possibly,
yeah, we were just talking about...
Or even Canada playing against European teams. How do you think they will do?
You could make I think, certainly a Canadian team that could definitely punch on that level. NA, it's a bit more difficult to say, but in a Team League format where it's just, it's one map, and then someone gets knocked out, and then you can bring in somebody else. I think you could make it work for NA, especially if it was only 3-man. You could definitely pull together a 3-man NA team very easily. That I think.
I was about to bring that up. I was wondering if 5-man would actually be more beneficial to say a US where I don't know, maybe some of the depth isn't as large in some of these countries.
I think that would be less beneficial to the US, really, honestly. I think you put a strong 3-man NA team together, 5-man, you're probably going to have some weaker links in there. So you might end up with a run and the momentum goes to the other guy. If you play it all kill, if you played it Pro League style, maybe that's a different matter entirely. But if you play it all kill, then I think Europe kind of stomps there, which is unfortunate. But I really enjoyed watching the Europeans play this weekend, and I thought there was some really high-level games and also some, I'm sorry, Todd, but some very amusing games in particular. One that you might remember. Oh, it was beautiful. It was really good. Like, I was really impressed by the level of play, and we actually saw some really good games on both Altazim and Habitation Station. I think, to me, as a caster anyway, I think Habitation Station's been vindicated. I've seen a lot of good games on there. There was one bullshit game, which was Mana versus Snoop, which ended up being this really horrible Swarm host game.
Oh god, that was painful to watch.
Yeah, and then there was the famous Altazim game between Titan and Snoot, which turned into a 1 hour 19-minute.
Me and Todd were talking about that game. Yeah.
You know, there's a weird common denominator going on between those games. I wonder what that might be. How did that turn out?
Steven, we saw plenty of those games too on GameOn. Just lots of spines and spores and.
I feel like I think all late game PvZs seem to tend towards that Swarm host on that Habitation Station map.
It seems to be that way, yeah, and we saw quite a bit of that. And then there was the Slivko versus Snoot game, which was the dumbest shit I've ever seen. Like, oh, Swarmhost versus Broodlord. Great. Sit back and watch this happening for 10 minutes. It was like watching a game of Nexus Wars where no one built any fucking structures. It was horrible.
Yeah. But people were, even with that, people were walking like statics like into the Locust Broodling battles. Yeah. I don't know why, but that was pretty interesting too. But highlights, what were your favorite games in the whole thing?
The favorite games, there were a lot of good ones. There was a really good TVT. It was, I think, Daishi versus Cass, I believe. It was on Altazim.
Yeah, I missed that one.
That was fucking awesome. A really, really good mech play, which is weird because you wouldn't think mech would work on a map that big. Apparently it does. So that was really fun to watch. Funnily enough, there were parts of that big game in Altazim between Snoot and Titan that were actually kind of good, watching some really nice transfused micro and some pretty cool moves.
Yeah.
But it was dampened by 90% of that game just being ridiculous and not making any sense, and just we wanted it to end. So that kind of ruined it. But I think there were some really, really awesome games, especially on day 2. Almost every game on day 2, I think, was really high quality and very entertaining in its own little way.
Yeah, Norway obviously... Norway prevailing at the end. I was talking to these guys about just Ike. Ike kind of surprised me. He looked really good, and I'd never even heard of him before the tournament. So it's really cool that this kind of tournament is able to showcase a lot of guys that are trying to make a name for themselves, or maybe are just part-timing it and just kind of playing it semi-casually, but just are really talented. And you get a chance to see these people.
Really nice breakthrough from Ike, actually. I think Ike and Hero Marine we already knew was good, right?
Yeah,
but
Marine's
Ike we
been
didn't
around
know
for a
anything
while.
about.
Yeah.
He pulled out some really great games against some very strong players, so I think Ike had a nice breakthrough performance there. I think Downfall almost did, but he unfortunately ran into a few problems there. He played a good game against Cass and then fell to pieces after that, but then he played another great game, actually, on day 2, which I enjoyed a lot. So it was cool to see him play. He was obviously not a bad pick at all for the French team.
Yeah, his weakest matchup is actually Terran, so he was very upset when he had to play Cass, and I think he should have won that game. There was times where he was doing very well, but then in the late game, I guess Cass was too experienced for him. But yeah, getting 2 kills later on, we really didn't expect that out of him. I thought he could beat 1 or 2 players here and there, but he did us proud.
Did each of the teams have coaches, or is just? I mean, we heard about a little bit of the drama with like Naniwa and that team like leading into it, but who was in charge of picking the teams in the end? Like how were they chosen in the end, or was it run by somebody? Like I didn't really follow that part of it.
I'm not sure for most countries. In France, it was gonna be me and Daishi and the 3 people who took top 3 in a tournament called Underdogs, which is run by O Gaming. So these guys were Chubbs, Lilbo, and Downfall. And Downfall won the last edition of this tournament over some pretty good players, actually. So that's why he was voted the most, apart from me and Daishi. But for all countries, I'm really not sure. I think maybe a captain was named or something, and then he ended up deciding which players are part of the vote, or maybe O Gaming did it themselves.
Oh, I see.
But as far as picking who goes next in the matches. It was mostly done by captains. There was a captain in each team, and very few teams had a manager. I think maybe Sweden. They had
Sweden did. That didn't really help them so much, though.
Yeah, that's probably true. Steven, you captain the U.S. team?
Yeah, sure, man. Sign me up.
That'd be pretty good. I don't see why you. I think captains are a good idea in general, like for something like this, and I don't see why you couldn't be a captain. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah. Each one had a captain. It was just I think it was only Sweden that had an actual manager, but that again didn't really help them in any way. So, never mind.
Yeah. So, any changes you would make to it? I mean, obviously, you talked about just it being just this really super long event that wasn't
too
planned.
Long. It's far too long for both viewers and for casters. It's kind of ridiculous. You'd have to at least make it a 4-day event, bare minimum. It would be nice to see an NA team in there, but it was also nice to know that everyone was playing on the same server with the same latency and that they weren't running into issues there. And then you don't have people quibbling over the results and saying, oh, well, he was cross-server, that's why. And also, logistically, I think hopping servers with that many casters would have been a nightmare. It already took several minutes to get everyone into the game every time, and there were actually so many observers that occasionally a teammate would join, and they'd have to then get rid of them, ask them to leave, because there just weren't enough observation spots for everybody. So I don't think we could have hopped servers. It would have just caused so much downtime.
Shout out to Day9.
Yeah.
We took some time. I'm just kidding. Just took a bit of time to join my game once, but it was okay.
Definitely happened.
Overall, I didn't feel like I waited too long as a player, because you always expect for there to be some downtime. But I think as a spectator, like if you're watching the French stream, they are in a bar, and like they have a lot of guests there. It's fun. But on the English stream, it's just you and Day9 talking all the time, and obviously sometimes you're gonna wanna take a break. You're gonna run out of things to say, so then you have to play some music. But people are not really seeing content then.
We played some damn good music, though.
That's right. That's right.
Best music NA.
All right, let's move on. Shoutcraft Clan Wars, another big topic for UTB. But let me get these guys' opinion on it first before we have you really give us even more details and just everything that's been happening recently. Steven, what you think about this whole Shoutcraft Clan Wars and what TB's been planning here? I'm not sure if you know all the details or not, but thoughts?
It seems interesting. That was the one where you talked about incorporating possibly the StarCraft Brood War and the Starbow matches into the Clan Wars as well, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it seems really interesting. It's interesting. I don't know what to say.
MLG, I didn't even realize it until I saw your post at TB that MLG's sponsoring it too.
Yeah, that was actually fairly last minute thing, actually.
That's actually what I'm most interested in. Are you going to be launching that on the MLG platform?
It's exclusively MLG TV, at least for the English stream. We're going to have a Korean stream as well, which actually Golden's going to be casting.
Interesting.
He got some new equipment lately to do that, so he's going to hopefully be inviting some random pros to come and cast for Korea, because we're trying to connect with the Korean audience, and we've got a lot of Korean teams as well, so we wanted to do that. But yeah, we're going to be exclusively MLG TV for that.
That'll be cool. Crazy. I think the one thing that seemed weird to me is I think I thought you said in your rules or whatever that in order for Starbow matches or Brood War matches to occur between teams, both teams would have to agree to it beforehand. Did I read that, or did I make that up?
Yeah, we still don't have an actual set of rules that are down in stone. We're negotiating them with the teams over the next week before we get them all sorted out. Wanted to make sure that they were absolutely, one, what the teams wanted, and two, that they were completely clear. The issue really is that obviously some teams just don't want to play Starbow at all. They don't want to commit any kind of resources to it. But then there are other teams that are totally into it. Root wants to play it. Axiom wants to play it. Even some of the Korean teams have a B teamer that's been playing a bit of it and has been trying it out, which is more than enough to be competitive. So we will never ever run both. I'm going to be honest. I think SC2 Brood War, that map is probably not going to get played much because
I don't think many people.
Yeah,
I don't think many people.
We just wanted to include it for novelty's sake, just in case there were two big Korean pros who said, "Oh, you know what? We want to play an exhibition match in this. We want to be part of that." Yeah, and we didn't want to show too much sort of favoritism towards Starbow, but Starbow is obviously the game that's got a lot of attention now. I think more so than SC2 Brood War. and I think it's got more potential for teams to actually play it and at least play a decent game on it. But we'd never have more than one map of it in one clan war at all. We want the majority of them to be straight up StarCraft 2.
Todd, what are your thoughts on having these monthly clan war events?
I think it sounds pretty good, but I don't have much information about it. Like, I read the posts, but like, for example,
That's what we got
I would like to know, like, how long is it gonna last? Is it gonna be same format as Pro League, as in one round you have the all kill format, then
there's no rounds. It's not a league, basically. So it will go on all year round, and each clan war is kind of like its own standalone event. So we'll have like unofficial rankings, but we're not concerned about any kind of league or anything like that. And the reason is, one, we thought that creating another league when there are so many to follow already would be a pain in the arse. Secondly, as we've seen with stuff like Ace of Team Story Cup, it's very difficult to nail down teams at the right times to play those matches. Yeah. So if we have a team that's not available for a couple of weeks, we simply don't give them a clan war. It's as simple as that. So we're always going to have a stable of teams we can pick from, and we can just do these little standalone events every time.
So these will
how long will one run for?
In what respect? Like the individual war itself?
I mean, one season or like one standalone event.
These are more like show matches, Todd, than...
Yeah, it's like a giant selection of show matches under a year-long kind of agreement where we get $5,000 a month in prize money every month from MLG, which we will then most likely split into 10 $500 matches. Yeah? And those matches will happen depending on what teams are available at the time. So there is no actual season. Teams can drop out when they want. We can get new teams. We can cycle things around a bit. And we can, of course, change our maps really whenever we want, as long as we give proper notice to the teams. And it seems like from a... Sorry, Stephen, go ahead.
Oh, no, go for it. You can finish.
I was just going to say, from a logistical standpoint, it's much more sensible, I think, and it makes it more feasible to maintain it. Taking on a whole league myself would kind of... I mean, I already run a team and 2 channels.
No time. Exactly.
Yeah, it's not feasible. And it's nice just to have something that...
I was going to say, it seems like you could run into a lot of weird things with like scheduling matches. It seems like there could be a lot of people that could get upset or not so upset. Like, I don't know. Like, maybe I don't know if you've thought about this more in the background. Or I'm sure you get some different ways of doing it. Like, let's say that I run like team Love Your Boyfriend, right? We'll just make up a name. Like, if I run that team and I want to partake in your nation wars, it seems like my success in those show matches could come down completely to like who you decide to schedule me against, right? Do you ever worry about like how you would decide who to schedule which team against? Like, what if there's some team that really wants to play but constantly gets scheduled against like the top 2 or like top 3, like the best teams in the league, or there's like a really good team and they get like an easy match? And I don't know, like, do you ever worry about people saying like, oh well, TB's just throwing easy money at this team, or like it's not really fair that these guys like? How do you have that planned out in terms of who you schedule who against?
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely a legitimate concern.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, fairness is a thing, but I think if any team gets involved in this, they know exactly who they could potentially end up running into. And there's certain teams that I didn't invite on the basis that I don't think they would be competitive. And you can infer whatever you want from that. But I think that every team in there has the potential to at least take some maps. Yeah, exactly. Let's look at like the weakest team in the league right now. Let's be totally unfiltered about that. It's probably IVD, right? You look at IVD and you say, okay, what have they got? Well, they've got Gamja, who was ex-Quantic, pretty good Korean Zerg player, not that well known. Apocalypse, probably their ace. And then you've got a couple of decent foreigners. You've got Puck, who is really, really good right now, Protoss-wise, NA. You've got Masson, who seems to be playing a bit too much Hearthstone lately, so he might not be all that good. And then Fog, who had a couple of good showings in MLG. So you've got a 5-man team that I think with proper preparation could actually take a good amount of maps and actually be competitive in the Pro League format. If it was an all-kill format, they'd get stomped into the ground. I think Pro League format helps balance it out just a little bit, especially best of 7 Pro League format, so you don't get those whitewashes. It's definitely a concern, though, and when we put these matches out, it's almost like kind of a bounty board, I suppose. We're going to have this board where all the team reps are, where I say, right, we've got a match here on this date. Let's see who's interested, find out who's interested, who can actually play that time, and then we look at who we've got and say, what would be a good match here that's actually going to work? And that's how we're going to try and build it. So you'll probably see NA versus NA quite a bit, but we do want to still give these NA guys a chance to compete against Korean teams, because honestly, it's a good opportunity for them to showcase. Because if you're the underdog, even if you take a couple of maps, you still look pretty good. And I think that's a very
Sure.
interesting story to tell people.
Okay, so you're pretty much ready for some clan wars to have a ton more viewership than other clan wars.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I have no doubt of that. You know, if we do EG versus TL, or even something like Team Liquid versus MVP or something like that, it's going to get more viewers than IVD versus My Insanity. And I'm okay with that.
Okay.
That's
something
fine. It doesn't
something
really
we talked
matter.
about a little bit earlier in the Skype chat that would be interesting. So what are going to be the restrictions on like players joining teams like mid-season?
Oh, mercenaries?
Or like yeah, for sure. There are nicer ways to that, but yeah, the people that will just hire off the Korean mercs to play for their team. Like all of a sudden the IVD team just picked up 3 B teamers from whatever Korean team. Like what are the restrictions on that? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, stuff like that.
Goes on to win the World Series. But whatever the case, I think that it's okay as long as they don't do it when they have a match scheduled, because we're going to give them basically 2 weeks prep time. So we start off by giving them the map list, Pro League style. We give it to them secretly. They have a week to figure out who they want to put out on each map. There's then a public announcement that says this is the lineup. They then have another week to prepare against that particular person and then play the map. As far as I'm concerned, once that's over and done with, you can add whoever you want, but I'm still thinking about how to deal with the idea of mercenaries. The reason I don't like the mercenary concept was demonstrated very aptly, I think, in Ace of Team Story Cup, where Western Wolves were carried on the back of San, who then couldn't show up to the finals and was never part of the team to begin with, and then Western Wolves get stomped into the ground.
Yeah.
And they got a finals position based on someone that wasn't even on their team to begin with. Which
Are there
think
finals
so.
for your tournament?
There are no finals, no. So that's why and that plus the Pro League style is why I'm kind of leaning towards allowing one merc. Because I think as long as you don't have an all-kill format, you can't just hire in a star player and have them stomp a mud hole in everybody. I think, okay, cool. Let's say IVD gets San, for instance. San wins one map and maybe he's their ace, so he has the potential to win 2, but there's still more maps to play.
Right.
So I think that you can maybe get away with it. And I know that, yourself, Todd, you've been asking whether or not that's a possibility. So
Yeah,
He's
we
a
like
merc for
I've been
hire,
thinking
baby,
about it.
right there.
I think the Pro League format definitely addresses that. And like you said,
I think
too,
it
I
does.
really don't like, like Team Liquid had those problems a lot too, and maybe even recently. I haven't followed Team Liquid playing recently, but like where Team Tasia, where like if you're missing that
absolutely
one
have-
player, the team entirely falls apart. And I think that the Pro League format makes it more of a team effort too. I know that when I've been on teams in the past, I've always felt like the Pro League format has always felt way more like a team effort than a all kill format where it's like, well, if you don't lose, like don't worry, we'll just throw him in at the end, and
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people don't even understand the team effort part of it. Actually, often comes way before the match even begins, because all of the preparation you're doing there is for specific maps against specific opponents. So it's an entire team effort to properly prepare and come up with your strategy. All kill seems more immediately team strategy, because like, oh, who we're gonna pick next for a sniper or whatever. That's fine, but you can get these really stupid snowballs where ATC Team Liquid Finals was a great example of that. Tasia carries. Hero does pretty well, but Hero can't come to the finals. And Team Liquid, well, we all killed them. Impact 5-0's Team Liquid. And I think that demonstrates the problem with it. You get these really streaky players that can all kill, and that's cool to watch. But you then get stupid scenarios where you don't have to have a balanced team. You have to have a star player that's just better than everybody else. Yeah. And we're seeing a lot of foreign teams will take on a Korean like that. Mouse Sports takes on Dia. And, in the hope that maybe a player like Dia could definitely all-kill in an all-kill format. But in Pro League, it's good to have him. He's going to be a great ace. But he doesn't make or break the entire team.
Yeah.
And I think you get to play that team. And you also get to exhibit the talents of people that don't usually get the spotlight. So I like that format more for this.
Yeah, it's just all about depth. I mean, it really showcases team depth and who does have the best, best from that standpoint. So I have the page up here, and one of the things I did want to talk about was the maps. And you touched on it just briefly that you can play whatever maps you want, and a lot of these maps that you have in here are pretty cool. I'm just naming just a few.
Wild.
Yeah, I mean Polaris for Rhapsody. Look at that, guys. I mean, look at some of these maps right here. Pretty cool.
Yeah, I think Polaris Rhapsody is the one that people are going to be most familiar with, because they actually used it for I think one map total. It got vetoed for everything else in the Red Bull Battlegrounds.
Oh, that's right.
But
they did use
the other
it once.
stuff,
yeah. New Pompeii.
The other stuff is things that people want to have seen.
I mean, this is
one thing
be
that I'm really
crazy.
starting to like, and Totalbiscuit talked about it a little bit earlier, is I'm actually really starting to enjoy the non-conventional maps.
Hell
because every
yeah.
time you see that map get picked, you can actually engage your brain and start to watch the match. Even from like the very first second, you don't actually know what's going to happen. Whereas now with like every map being the same, like the first 10 minutes of every single game of every single matchup pretty much play out the exact same. Everything. Like you could get up, walk away, come back in 5 minutes, and pick up right where everything left off. So seeing those unconventional maps, even if some of them appear a little bit dumb at first, whether it's the Daedalus Point or it's the Habitation Station or any of the maps that TB can choose, especially if you give smart players 2 weeks to prepare on these kind of crazy maps, I think that you could see a lot of really interesting stuff going on. That makes the game exciting for observers, casters, and players.
Yeah, the thing about Pro League format as well, if a map ends up being a piece of shit, like, say, Arkanoid in the first season of Pro League, that ends up being a map where does is to send out a Terran and build Reapers, because it's the only way to bypass those timed rocks.
Yeah.
Okay, we get a couple of games of that, and then we just rotate the map out. Fine. We don't have to play 50 to 100 games on that. We could just rotate that map out if it doesn't end up working, or we may see a counter meta to it. Maybe the first few games on that map all end up being the same, then someone figures out the counter to it, and suddenly we see that there's sort of mini meta game inside that map, which I think
exactly.
I find that really interesting.
So
even if none of these maps end up being...
What Totalbiscuit said there, like when every game starts to feel like a different, when every map starts to almost feel like a different game, and every map carries its own meta with it. Those I recently, in talking to Desiree a little bit, I don't downvote any maps anymore, because I found that even as a player, I love it when I enter a map and I have to actually engage my brain a little bit and think oh, I like to do this opening a lot, but actually there's a meta where Terrans will actually, because of the rush distance, will open with that Proxy Reaper a little bit more often, which means I have to think about my build, and then the Terran has to think about the fact that I'm thinking about it. I really, really, really enjoy going into every map with there being a separate meta that kind of piles on top of the normal meta, because I think it makes the game way more interesting.
So are these going to be the only maps for most of the year, or this is just the first few, and it's going to keep cycling in
This is the first wave.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. We could even go as far as to cycle in new maps every month. It depends.
Cool.
We want to see how the maps develop, because one of these, or even more, maybe all of them, end up being absolute duds. Like, they're completely useless. There's only one way to play that map. I would say, all right, cool, we tried it. No big deal. We didn't make or break someone's $20,000 tournament run based on this map being in here. It was one map, no big deal. They had 2 weeks to prepare for it. Fine. Cool, let's find some others. We actually have a shortlist. I say shortlist. There's about 37 maps that we've got that were all voted on by a huge Skype group, which consists of almost all the map makers from the Team Liquid mapping community, as well as some of the famous guys like Team Crux and ESV. And they came up with that shortlist, which includes a 2v2 map, by the way, if people didn't realize. Sacred Path is actually 2v2. And we will play 2v2 on that map. And it's a pretty interesting one as well, because it's actually a remake of Iron Curtain from Brood War. And it has those rocks, and it's specifically designed to try and encourage later game 2v2 play. It makes it very difficult to rush. So we're going to see if that works. Maybe it doesn't. And if it doesn't, okay, no big deal. We'll replace it with something else.
My only request for you, Totalbiscuit, is that when you start doing some of these unconventional maps, I implore you to ignore absolutely everything that pro gamers say for at least the first month when you do these maps, because pro gamer feedback is the absolute worst when it comes to balancing maps. Because I get worried that we've gotten stuck into this.
We have one in this call. Why don't we just talk to him?
Fucking look at the pro man reading the pro forums with Villo and everyone else discussing all that shit. Pro gamers get into the disgusting mindset. What? Where the StarCraft 2 balance, whatever, for the Heart of the Storm. I remember reading a lot of that when I was in Poland.
What's Villo doing on the pro forum though?
No, really the problem, I think that people get into the mindset too much, and I saw this, unfortunately. It was the worst comment, and it was the most upvoted one in the Starbow thread, where the Starbow had made a recent patch change, and the most upvoted comment was, wow, look at that, we can patch a game more than twice a year. And that's actually not a good thing. And I'm not talking about whether Starbow's good or bad or blah, blah, blah or anything. But you never, ever, ever want players in the mindset where they feel like their complaining can dictate the map pool. Where because it's always in a player's best interest. The player's best interest is much different than the observer or the tournament. Yeah. Because tournaments want interesting maps. People want to watch interesting maps. And players don't want that. Players want long, boring maps that will always go to the same meta, the same macro that they can always practice. And then we wind up in areas where we were at the end of Wings of Liberty, where you had a horrendously stale meta where everybody was playing the same 30, 40-minute macro games. You know, PvZ comes to mind. Jesus Christ, PvZ comes to mind. And pro gamers will always elect to balance maps more in that favor. I've never in my life heard a pro gamer make a suggestion for balance that would make the game more diverse or interesting in the early game. It never happens. Zerg players always complain that, you know, bunker build time needs to be longer, and Turax or Widow Mines need to be nerfed. You know, Protoss players will always complain that, you know, Fungal is too strong, or we need more force fields, or whatever. Terran players will always complain, you know, like mech isn't viable, about like we need all these buffs, and nerfs. Like, I've always seen people, you know, mention things to move the game into more of a stale, safe late game, more so than a, hey, I really, like, when was the last time a programmer said, I really want this crazy map where, like, crazy weird shit can happen in the first, like, 10 minutes of the game? Like, no player ever advocates for that kind of map. But if you force them to play on it and then you put money behind it, I feel like it actually forces players to, like, actually start to adapt to maps rather than wait for map makers to just throw out more boring maps that they can play the same way on, you know?
All right, Todd, let's get your thoughts on this.
Let's hear from Todd.
I mean, Todd is a pro player here, and he's the guy that's, you know, has to practice a lot of these maps over and over again, preparing for events. So, what do you think about adding new maps and, you know, especially maps that are quite different conceptually than the ones that we see currently in the ladder?
Yeah, I think Steven has a good point. I know that a lot of pro players, we condemn very easily the new maps. Like, for example, every time there is new maps being added on, especially like since they did this thing where the ladder maps are used now for the WCS, and we take this very seriously. Every time there are new maps, I look at them and I'm like, these maps are shit. I don't want to play on them. Bring back the old maps, please. And then I end up playing more and more on them. I see more games. I see other people's ideas, and I realize that these maps are not necessarily that bad. Sometimes they are truly and really bad, but sometimes you can get used of them. That was the case for example, Neoplanet. When this map came out, I was like, oh, okay, I'm done with StarCraft 2. Like, it's not possible. Like, I can't take a third base. What am I going to do?
Right.
Whirlwind, I didn't like. Every new map I've never liked. But then as time passes by, I learned to like a little bit more. So right now, for example, we have Heavy Rain, Habitation Station, and Daedalus. Daedalus is going to be a veto for the rest of my life, but Heavy Rain and Habitation Station, I'm giving the benefit of the doubt to. I'm playing them a little bit. I'm trying to discover how to play them better, and I'm discovering better ways to play them. And I think that's a really good thing about what Totalbiscuit is going to do with this tournament, because Pro League does that, and I know that a lot of players that are not playing in Pro League, which is basically every good foreigner outside of Korea, or every foreigner, they think that, or they would have liked to play in Pro League just to try, because it's interesting. You get to practice on a map that's not played in ladder. You play a lot of custom games with somebody on it. You learn ways to play it, and then you go into your match really well prepared. So now it's going to be an opportunity basically to get a glimpse at what this is like, and I think this is going to be really cool.
I mean, it feels like a new game, you know, like when you play on a new map, you get that kind of reinvigorating feeling, I would think. But I do have one more question for you, Todd. One more question before Totalbiscuit get to you. How much of it do you think is just like people feeling like the time they invested already in learning how to play the style that they've played, you know, just practicing it, honing it, and they feel like it just pretty much goes out the window anytime you introduce like these kind of new maps? How much of it is that, you know, when it comes to players pushing back on new maps?
It's hard to say. When I play a new map, I see everything that's bad about it because I'm bad on it. Obviously, I cannot know what's good about it because I don't know the map well, so I don't know what's good to do on it unless I figure something out early on. It's the same as if you asked, like, why do people dislike when somebody or something is renewed, like a software like Skype or Windows 8? Why is it worse than Windows 7, you know? It's the same thing for maps. Like, new, a lot of the time, is going to be hard to deal with, but as time passes by, you get more and more used of it, and you might think that this is not a big deal or this is actually better. And that's the same thing for maps.
Okay. Totalbiscuit?
I think for foreign players in particular, it can be a problem because they're already sort of chasing the Koreans as it stands, and they're trying to raise their skill level as quickly as they can. And I think perhaps and this is what they've said to me, they feel that every time there's a new map, they feel that not all of their skills transfer. So it's like it's a setback to them in their player development every time the maps change. Because like, oh, we just got okay at this, and we just got to where the Koreans were 2 months ago. Now we're going to change again and again and again. When Habitation Station came out, and also when Altazim came out in particular, Altazim was slammed by every pro that I spoke to. almost every Protoss, in fact, every Protoss I spoke to about Habitation Station said, no fucking way are we playing PvZ on this map. This is terrible. Giving the Zerg a gold base. There's a reason why gold bases were taken out. Blah, 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 blah. And then we end up seeing some fantastic games on both of those maps. And I felt terrible for prejudging Altazim because we saw some great games in Nation War. We did also see some shitty games on that map, but we saw some really good ones too. And it is in the pro players' best interests in the short term, I think, to say, oh, we should have the maps be the same. Because we can apply the same skills to the same maps. We can use the same builds we've always been comfortable with. But in the long term, if you want StarCraft 2 to be viable for years to come and you want to keep people interested, can we just not have any more games on fucking Belshir? You know, we can't keep those maps in rotation for that long.
Yeah,
we can't keep
or the
making
rehashes
same
of those maps that are really the same fucking map with a different name and a slightly different tile set. And actually, a really interesting thing that you bring up that I would actually disagree with, and you could talk for hours on this, I think that having the varied map pool with the specialized strategies for each map actually gives foreigners a little bit of an edge.
Yeah, I do
Not
too.
an edge like they're better than Koreans, but an edge where like they could actually make targets to Koreans. Because if you were to give me
yeah,
you know, right? You have
yeah,
like a
I've got
crazy
it now,
map
because you're talking
that has
about
a
it's
ton
not
of
pure
different
mechanical
possible...
skill anymore,
exactly.
Yeah, it's just like the Heart of the Swarm, right? When Heart of the Swarm first came out, you know, there were a lot of people that had success because everything was new again, and
exactly.
you know, we always have that brief period.
Because the game actually becomes a real-time strategy game, which is very rare for StarCraft. And I'm not trying to just shit on StarCraft, but like what Totalbiscuit just said, like a lot of the games that we see that turn into macro games, those are really just mechanic slugfests, which with the way that foreigners practice, you know, maybe 2 to 3 hours a day if you're lucky, they're never going to be able to catch Koreans playing that way, and it'll never ever happen. However, given the ability to practice on specialized maps, like I could see some of the crazier players, the players that I always give shit on ladder, like Ruff, or just people that are like known for doing like crazy efficient cheeses. You know, people like Hitman, you know, those kinds of people. If you put them on certain maps, all of a sudden, even a foreigner whose mechanics are iffy can all of a sudden become a really dangerous kind of deadly player, because now Koreans aren't able just to like do the mechanic slugfest where they practice, you know, everything over and over and over and over again. Now you have to actually, you know, like be prepared for a variety of strategies on a variety of maps.
The creative player and the strategist are not rewarded enough currently in StarCraft 2.
Yeah, probably not.
Because of
Yeah,
replays.
you can talk a lot for
it's
that,
because
but
of
yeah.
replays, right? And that's a huge deal. So switching up the map pool a lot, I think, brings that back. It brings value back to those type of players. And you know, guys like Cats, right? Cats, I mean, it's going to become more viable too. I think if maps change constly.
And it's entertaining for the viewer to see that shit.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
You know, proxy hatched the natural or did some other crazy stuff. Great. The viewer is highly entertained by that. You know, you saw the top voted Reddit poster. Starbucks did the same thing again, by the way. The drone stack against Dia. That's the second time he's pulled that shit off. Second time people have been extremely hyped about that kind of idea. A very specific cheese in for a very specific setup. It's pretty cool to see that. And one other thing is that I wouldn't want to see all of these maps just go and replace the WCS maps, but I like to be able to show new ideas to the people that are making the WCS maps and say, look, there may be some other viable ways of making this go. And I think it's the same principle with Starbow as well. Starbow's never going to replace StarCraft 2. It would be a weird world if it did. But it shows the kind of things that can work. And the kind of design philosophies that can maybe counter to what the guys are doing over at Blizzard right now.
Yeah. And we're always harking, and we kind of touched on this last week a little bit. We're always harping on just balance and David Kim balancing the game and not being happy about just maybe the pace at which things are being balanced and stuff. And this is something we can control. This is something that I feel like the community can control to a lot more extent, and we can, like Starbow, we can try things like that. We can try new maps, new map concepts, and then it won't even be the balance of certain units won't be as emphasized. We can create maps where, like, say, Swarm Hose isn't as emphasized, right? Or maybe not even used at all. And
well, they tried to do that, and it happened anyway. So, Swarm Host shouldn't really work the way that it did, but Titan insisted on butting his head against it for an hour, so I guess that happens.
Yeah, sure.
But isn't that what happens in Brood War? When Kespa was basically changing the maps all the time and basically affecting balance through the maps they were making?
Yeah, there was a point in time where Kespa was making maps specifically to make Savior lose because CVT was unfucking stoppable. Yeah, where they were making maps that were dramatically favoring Terrans because nobody could fucking beat Savior TVZ in a time where a time where TVZ was considered and had incredibly Terran favored. Savior came and fucking annihilated everyone, and then Kespa started making maps so that he would lose games to Terrans.
And that's a cool way. That's a cool way. That's a very. It's more of a nimble way of balancing the game or creating, just affecting the dynamics of win
It's a
percentages and stuff like
non-permanent
that.
way of doing it too.
Yeah, and very exactly.
That's the best thing about it. It's like, oh, okay, right, a map fucked with the balance. We'll just remove the fucking map, and that's even in control of the tournaments. That's not something we have to rely on Blizzard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But overall, TB, like, I'm really, really, really happy about this because I've, like a year ago, and those map guys in particular, that Skype convo you're talking about, I've been, I've been a proponent of those guys for a while now, and and even some of those, I've had them on Climbing the Ladder, and we've talked about maps, but honestly, my pool is not enough, so like you doing these things and you really jumping on board and just really buying in and doing events, big events, and really putting this out there and getting behind all that, I think is huge, and it's huge for StarCraft 2 and the community and the industry itself. So, really, kudos to you there, man. I mean, it's like it's a big deal.
It's more a case of
actually.
just getting an audience on it, It's
It
as much
is,
as I
it
like
is.
to say, the source saving esports thing. It's $5,000 a month. It's not that much.
It's not
but
even just that.
I
It's-
think for the map guys, it's about getting their maps actually used in something and getting them exposure. Because outside of the Team Liquid map contest and Red Bull to some degree taking Habitation Station and a couple of other things like Blitzkrieg and New Polaris Rhapsody, there's no opportunity for these map makers to get anywhere because the WCS map pool is king. And in particular, tournaments like DreamHack are very stick in the mud when it comes to their map pools. They stick to what WCS does, and that's that. And that's got to give in some way.
Yeah, and this is like an iterative process, like just trying to at least to do the steps 1 and 2 to get to the point where we want. And I think this is much more than steps 1 or 2. And I think lots of people, thousands of people will probably be seeing these maps, and we'll probably have a lot of appreciation for some of the creativeness that a lot of these map makers do. Those guys work really hard. They have been underappreciated for a couple years now, and been on the verge of just quitting. Like all those guys, man. I mean, they've been doing it for nothing right now, and they had some momentum when Diamond was, ESV and Diamond were kind of making some grounds, but then that just completely stopped, and they were just lost, for a while. So it's really, really cool that we can get it to relevancy, get them showcased and that kind of, to this extent. It's really, really cool.
I'm curious, TB, how many Clone Wars should we be expecting to see, per month or per week?
10 per month.
10 a month, right?
10.
Okay.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And
Split up there. We might end up having some higher value ones if I have a very busy month and I can't cover all 10. So we'll just say, because we got 5,000 budget a month, so we're going to have to use it. So there may be some higher value ones.
Awesome.
how important for you is it going to be to schedule outside of other events like WCS?
We've got to dodge WCS, but Blizzard actually did approach us as soon as we announced and said, we'd like to work with you to make sure that we could, all of these events can go on. They're actually really hyped about it. I even heard rumors that the Morheims were really hyped about it, which is really cool.
Awesome.
So they seem to be really behind it. The Morheims.
Morhan. See, Mike Morhan and.
Yeah.
Hold on, let me go.
CEO. He's CEO.
Are you kidding me?
You don't know who Mike Morhan is? Oh my
Fucking
gosh.
troll. Jesus.
Oh, okay, I got it.
Yeah.
Played Zerg, right?
Actually, what does Mike
Asshole.
play? I don't actually know. What does he play?
I have no idea.
That's a good
I know what
question.
instrument
I know
he plays,
Amy.
but not what race.
I know, I don't know what Amy. Yeah, Mike and Amy play. They love StarCraft, so that's why it's pretty
I spoke to
awesome.
them quite a bit at Red Bull. They were really enthusiastic. They just came to watch. Amy in particular is extremely enthusiastic about StarCraft, which kind of gave me a bit of a new perspective on those guys and how, for them, I think it's almost like StarCraft is the redheaded stepchild for Blizzard. And then they've got the money makers, WoW and Hearthstone, and then they move towards Project Titan and Heroes of the Storm. And then StarCraft's kind of sitting there, and the execs are looking at it and saying, why is this still around? Why are we still supporting this? And the Morheims are saying, because it's fucking great. That's why we're still supporting it. And I just hope that attitude continues from them. So we'll see what Clan Wars does. Hopefully it's
micro
okay.
bullshit so we can buy skins and shit for our units and they can actually make some money.
I would love to.
God damn it.
I would love to throw money at it. I really would.
All right, let's move on to Todd's event, Where.com Invitational. Let's talk a little bit about that. Big event, and I think this is the first event that you're organizing and producing, and
XMG Invitational I did too,
Oh,
but
okay,
it was
okay,
much smaller scale.
Yeah.
Scale. It was just 8 players online as well, and just easier in general. Like this, getting in touch with all the Koreans and all that is.
Yeah.
It's been difficult. It's been a lot of work, a lot more than I had anticipated. Again, the new respect for people who work tournaments by organizing this.
All right, let me bring this up on the screen real quick. But we're talking like some of the top Koreans in this tournament. And guys like look at just group A, B, C, and D there. I mean, these are some huge names. Some foreigners mixed into it too. Looks like you and Nathaniel. I think Nathanius isn't going to be casting, right? I think you mentioned that Roddy will be taking Nathanius' spot.
Yeah, it's going to be Rotterdam for 3 of the 4 days. And on the Friday, actually, I'm not sure who I'm going to be casting with. Maybe solo. We'll see.
So what made you want to plan this or organize this?
You mean how did it come?
Were doing an event and got jealous.
Yeah, I mean.
So I decided to make a 10 times better event, and I'm just.
Oh man. Okay.
No, I have this one friend who has some websites, and he wanted to sponsor one tournament because he's a big StarCraft fan. So I told him there probably would not be any return on investment or anything like that. But he said, "Fine, I'd still like to do it just because I've been such a big fan of StarCraft for a long time, and this is definitely going to be fun, and the name of my website is going to get out there." So I told him, "Fine, then I can help you and organize it." And he's just started from there. I started asking players on Skype with what was the prize money, and a lot of them said yes, to my surprise. I mean, the players that you see in the tournament, they are not the A-list that I had. For example, I had a lot of guys like SOS Deer that I wanted to be in the tournament, and that say no. Pretty much everybody in Pro League said no, except Hero. And in the end, I had to replace some of them, mostly with like foreigners. With my version of the tournament, there wasn't going to be many foreigners, which I think actually would have been a mistake because it's always interesting to see foreigners versus Koreans. So I wanted to make this right and make everybody happy with it. So I asked for a lot of feedback from a lot of people, from the sponsor himself, from players that organize tournaments, and I wanted it to be organized in a very clean way too. So I made sure I picked the right formats. 4 groups of 4, you can go wrong with that, GSL format, and then a bracket with the way that most tournaments do the brackets, where 2 players that were in the same group cannot meet again in the finals. And then I had to look at the schedule and the way the matches were going to be played, cross-server and all that. So I did a lot of matches and groups depending on that. For example, I put 4GG versus TLO because I knew they were both in Europe. So just like TB mentioned, it's very important to try and favorize these matches where players, they're not going to be playing cross-server as much as possible.
So you deliberately picked matches. So this wasn't seeded. You didn't seed the groups. You actually specifically picked matchups. That's actually how we did. We did all Shoutcraft. We did the same way.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. I think
rigging matches. That's pretty low, even for you, Todd.
Fixing the matches.
God, I mean, you know, when I'm playing in a tournament and I know the people organize the tournament this way and they did that, I'm actually pretty upset because they can basically pick who you're going to play against and to some extent choose the outcome too. But now as a tournament organizer, I realize that this is very, I guess, necessary in a way to keep things interesting, to make sure there is not too many players from the same race in a group, to make sure there is not 2 teammates in the same group and all that. And that's going to make it very interesting, and the players are not going to be unhappy either. Even though, for example, some players in the group A now were pretty unhappy because they thought their group was the toughest, but that's...
Todd's gone mad with
I think
power.
it's better. I think it's better to just fucking say it, because I have a feeling, obviously I can't confirm anything, or like I don't actually know or whatever, but like I have a feeling that it probably happens a lot anyway. People just act like it's completely random, but really there's no way to know, and it's something you can never enforce. So I mean, like I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that if we're like all being adults, you know.
What?
Yeah.
Fixing like
I don't think there's any tournament that does a live drawing.
Yeah,
ever.
that actually honestly randomizes the groups. I'm pretty sure there's a little bit of picking and choosing that goes on there, you know.
I don't know. Some of the tournaments that end up with like 4 Protoss in a group or 3 Protoss and a Terran. I mean,
they want to get rid of them.
Yeah, they want to get rid of some of the Protoss. They know that only 2 can advance. It's a good way of doing it.
Right. Right. Okay.
But I mean, if you're gonna be honest, like as a player, you shouldn't expect kind of a balanced ride through a tournament. Like you might run headlong into a player that's just gonna kick the living shit out of you, and so be it. It's a competitive game. You're not being mollycoddled through to the round of 8.
Yep.
If you can't win, you can't win.
And even in truly randomized events, that will happen. Like, let's remember the MLG Open bracket. You could either have an easy fucking ride to seeding, or you could have the most nightmare fucking ride to seeding. Like, there was nothing fair about the truly randomized, the MLG Open bracket. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it depends on the event, guys. I mean, like WCS is pretty fair. Well, I guess gaining points. If the gaining points isn't completely randomized, then I guess that in itself is
the gaining
not
points
quite the
thing
same
could get a bit weird after a while. In particular, when it's like, oh yeah, this is a WCS Season 1 Tier 1 event with 75% invites. Like, oh great, that sounds reasonable.
That's true. No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
No, but the only thing I was going to say is that I think that Naniwa versus that unfortunate Bulgarian player today maybe demonstrates like the most mismatched seeding. That's what happens when you seed sometimes. Naniwa #1 seed. This guy apparently just got murdered. Like apparently it was really hard to watch because it was just.
It was so hard to watch that it didn't even show up on the stream for a while.
Oh wow. They wanted to hide it. It was
Exactly.
it was like watching a snuff film in StarCraft 2.
Oh god, yeah. No, but this group of players, I think it's a great group of players. So it's gonna be lots of competitiveness and lots of intrigue with a lot of personalities here. You got Hyun, and I mean a lot of people have been in the news lately too. So it's kind of very, very cool. But
it's a great lineup.
Yeah, expecting big things to happen. Aren't you busy enough, dude? You freaking play and you cast. Now you're gonna freaking be producing events and shit. God, man.
Hey, it's fun. It's a great experience, though. Like a lot of the things that I tried, for example, last time when I wrote something that was pretty long too, that took a lot of time, but it's always good experiences, and it's definitely something I wanted to try at some point. So now, if this is a success, I'm going to be very happy. It's not a success yet. Once the games have been shown and the stream has ran smooth, this is going to be a success. But so far, I still need to wait, and at the end of the event, I will not be stressed anymore about it.
Right. All right, cool. Why don't we take a quick break, and then we'll go into Q&A. So we will be right back.
Okay.